Hello and welcome to the YouTube channel for Craftworld, Eldar.com. I'm Brent, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about what the October changes to the Munitorium Field Manual, that is points costs in 40k, and also some changes to the Pariah Nexus Tournament Companion, and also the core rules of the tabletop game mean specifically for Space Elves of the non-Dracari variety. Now, I'm not going to run you through every change to the core rules in Pariah Nexus. There are lots of other content creators who have covered that. And Goonhammer, if you'd like to read an article about it, has some pretty excellent articles. So instead, I'm going to cover the changes that are relevant to Aeldari. I'll talk about the points value changes second. All that news is good news. Things only got cheaper. And I'll start by talking about which changes to Pariah Nexus I think are most relevant. I don't think any of the core rule modifications, they're really just like FAQs, are terribly important specifically for Space Elves. So let's just briefly start with this. There have been a number of changes to the Pariah Nexus tournament deck. If you're playing competitive 40k, you're probably using the Pariah Nexus tournament deck. It came out, I think, in June, and for you newer players, this is what you use to generate your primary mission. That is how you score primary objectives, your secondary scoring points, what map you're playing on and where the objectives are, and special rules that are in play. And to my mind, there have been 4 not insignificant changes to these rules. One of them, I don't know, it's not really a change, it's just a clarification that's important. And we'll just briefly go through what those are. So the first is a change to how secret missions work. So if you're not familiar, secret missions are the updated version of gambits from Leviathan. Gambits did not really work. They were almost never used in tournament play, and when people did use them, generally they were doing it for fun because they were losing anyway. Theoretically, secret missions are a way to keep the game competitive when one player is losing badly on primary scoring. So the primary scoring for you newer players generally is the points you're generating by controlling objectives on the table. There are ways to score secondary points off objectives too, but you're capped at 50 points for primary scoring, and these are scored for objective control, for board control. Well, in Pariah Nexus, you have an opportunity to, after the third battle round, or at the beginning of the third battle round, if you are tied for or behind in points, you can opt for a secret mission, which gives you some other way to score a bunch of points doing something very specific, and your opponent doesn't know exactly what you're trying to do, but maybe you're trying to like mess up a bunch of their units and leave them with not a lot left, just scattered battle shocked stuff, or to have like a warlord in their backfield doing stuff at the end of the game. It's stuff that's possible, much easier to do than the gambits, but your opponent can still certainly prevent. And the way secret missions work is they limit your ability to score primary mission points, like normal objective control points, to 20. You can only score 20, and then it's possible to score up to 20 for whatever your secret mission is. So the disadvantage to doing a secret mission is that the maximum score you can have for primaries is 40 instead of 50. And then the advantage is that if your opponent really had objective control locked down, you have this other way to pick up some points. So they changed the rules so players who opt for a secret mission can no longer score any points for primaries on the 5th turn of the game. And a classic Aeldari move is to max out primary scoring on the 5th turn of the game because we're fragile. We're not good at controlling objectives in open ground compared to some other armies, until a lot of our opponents' hardest hitting tools have been taken away. Theoretically, this limitation should hit Aeldari harder than some other armies because we're fast and we're good at getting on objectives at the end of the game. To be honest, I am not worried about this change. I really don't find myself using secret missions. I still think we're kind of in a universe in which if you're opting into secret missions, you're likely the game is not going very well anyway, and you can probably find a way before turn 5 to score 20 points for primaries. To put it, if you can't score even 20 points for primaries before turn 5, you're probably losing anyway. So theoretically, this one dings Aeldari who like to be late game scorers, but you can still be a late game scorer if you're not running secret missions. And if you are running secret missions and you can't score 20 on primaries before the last turn, I think that you probably weren't going to win. So let's take a quick look at the others, some changes to primary missions that might slightly change the way that you play. So the most vanilla primary mission, therefore one of the ones that's most popular for competitive play because it's the most straightforward, linchpin, has changed to limit scoring to 15 points per turn, like the classic scoring limit. Now, the way linchpin works is every round you score 3 victory points for controlling your home objective marker. Oh, nice. And if you don't control your home objective marker, you can only score 3 victory points for holding objective markers outside of your deployment zone. But if you do control your home objective marker, you score 5 victory points for controlling objectives outside of your deployment zone. Basically, this is the one where you need to control your home objective in order to do well on primary points. You also need to control objectives in the midfield, but you can't lose your home objective. It used to be possible to like grab 23 points on this in the late game. You can't do that anymore. So now you just have to honestly cap it at 15. This is how things were back in Leviathan. Generally, scoring was capped at 15 per turn. I don't think you're going to have to use like wildly different tactics. But again, if you were, as a highly competitive Aeldari player in tournament play, relying on really maxing out your score turns 4 and 5 to get to 50 on primaries, you've got to slightly rethink how you do things and be a little bit more scory turns 2 and 3. So it's probably worth mentioning, even though I think it's a minor change that really only affects highly competitive players who are being super tactical. Okay, there's another thing here which is not actually a change, it's a clarification. People were not sure. The Terraform mission is the one that requires you, well, they all require you to capture objectives outside of your deployment zone, but Terraform is the one where you can perform an action on an objective with one of your units and terraform that objective. And unlike most action-based scoring options, you can do this with multiple units on the same turn on multiple objectives. You can terraform multiple objectives, and you score 4 VP for controlling an objective in the command phase the way you normally would, but you also score 2 VP for each objective marker that you terraformed during the battle, and they just keep scoring for you. So if you lose an objective but you're the one who terraformed it, you continue to score points for it even after you've lost it. This is actually a really good primary mission for Aeldari because we've got a bunch of units that are fast enough to get onto objectives without advancing and perform the terraform action early and just kind of lock down the terraform portion of the primary scoring. Now, there was some debate about whether or not, because it says on the terraform mission that it can only be done by 1 unit. Each objective can only be terraformed once. And there was some debate about whether or not it meant once by each player or once, and they have clarified that it means once. So your swooping hawks, your warp spiders, your things that can make scout moves or infiltrate before the game begins and jump on midfield objectives in the first turn and terraform them, even if they then die to do it, or the second turn or whatever. Like that's a big deal. Now, the terraform action finishes at the end of your opponent's turn, so they have an opportunity to kill whatever's trying to terraform the objective, which means that stuff that's like really out in the open, you know, your swooping hawks are not going to survive to terraform. But oftentimes there's like a midfield objective that's kind of out of line of sight, and so Aeldari are particularly good at this. You can also sometimes use infiltrators to like screen to prevent your opponent from clearing stuff off of an objective. It's also this kind of objective play is one of the reasons why durability lists are so popular right now. I made a recent video about the triple threat list, the stuff like the Avatar of Cain and Wraith Guard that will help you screen something and sort of pin down control of stuff in the midfield, which is more important, I think, than it was in Leviathan, which I should have said when I made the triple threat video. So this is not really a change. It's just a clarification. Last one is really minor. Storm hostile objective, that primary where you get points for like killing enemy models on an objective, can now be scored turn 1. So this is yet another reason when you deploy your infiltrators or you make your scout moves or whatever, not to finish moves on an objective in the midfield. If you can avoid it, it could just be giving up free points to your opponent in matchups where this matters. So it's just a thing to think about, little thing. Okay, let's get to the fun and interesting, cool stuff, which is the points changes. And as I said before, it's all good news. Some of it I think is slightly better news than other news, but it's all good news. It's very exciting. Our stuff exclusively went down. Elves are cheaper, which makes sense because they've been struggling a little bit since multiple rounds of nerfs and points increases. I'm trivially struggling. I haven't really felt hard done by, but I think all these changes make sense and are good. So here we go. First off, Corsair Void Reavers and Void Scarred have both gone down 10 points for 5 models and more for 10 models, 20 points for 10 models. This is good. I think it's particularly good for the Void Reavers, the cheaper ones, because it cements their role, I think, as a somewhat disposable battle line scoring unit. Pariah Nexus, more than Leviathan, rewards battle line units. There are a whole bunch of like mission rules. I think something like half the mission rules give some bonus to battle line units. And a lot of the scoring requires you to perform actions. And whereas back during Leviathan, actions, there were no official rules for actions. We knew that they were happening, but it was just this implied thing where a unit would choose not to shoot and it could perform an action. And one of the changes for for Pariah Nexus is that there are now specific rules for performing actions that state that a unit can't advance or fall back. So before, during Leviathan, the things that like quote unquote like performed actions, but we weren't calling it that, if they had the assault keyword, if they were eligible to shoot, like they could advance and do the thing. And now you can't do that anymore. So having units that are cheap and disposable that scout before the game begins. Void Reavers can scout 7 inches before the game begins. So you deploy them at the front of your deployment zone. You scout them forward behind cover, out of line of sight. And then on turn 1, they're close enough to the midfield to be able to make a move, be eligible to perform an action without needing to advance, because you can't do that. And then at 70 points, if they just die, that's fine. And it gives them kind of a distinctly different role from something like Banshees or Scorpions. It was difficult before to justify Void Reavers because Banshees and Scorpions were more efficiently pointed and they were better fighters. And now it's kind of clear what Void Reavers are supposed to do. They really are a scoring unit. They've got their battle line, so they get the various Pariah Nexus battle line rewards, and they do have the OC of 2, which doesn't come up a ton because they die pretty fast. But I think that it is, at least with the points decrease, it is now at least worth considering 5 Void Reavers for disposable action-based scoring purposes, whereas before it wasn't really justifiable. I still think they're certainly not an auto-include or anything, but I think it's certainly worth thinking about. It's one of the only points changes that I think genuinely makes a difference in what units you think about might make it into a competitive list, as opposed to just saying, oh, great, my thing that I was already using costs less, or this other thing costs less, but I'm still not going to use it. I think the change to the Void Scarred, like, it's nice that they're cheaper now, but I think it's less relevant because that really is a combat unit, and for 80 points for 5 or 160 points for 10, we have a lot of better options. I think they're still a purely narrative pick. The Falcon was reduced from 140 to 130 points, which is great because it's a highly competitive unit that's in lots of lists, that has great synergy with Fire Dragons, with Striking Scorpions. It was already good at 140 points, and at 130, it's even better. So you probably just got some you may have just gotten some free points in whatever your current competitive list is. The Fire Prism also down 10 points. We haven't seen a ton of Fire Prisms in the last few months. I still think they're good. I think that they're especially good because you don't have to use fate dice on them for them to be really powerful. And I think that in lists that are already running a bunch of durable units, they have good synergy. So maybe they're a little more tempting at 170 points, but as a percentage of the unit, it's still a pretty minor change. Shining Spears, this is arguably one of the more significant ones, are now down to 90 points. They were the last time around reduced to 100 points from, I think, 120. Nobody was using them at 100 points. Now they're down to 90. They've been paying for the sins of 9th edition, where they were one of the best units in the game. And I think at 90 points, they're certainly worth at least thinking about the way you're going to use your Shining Spears. I'm going to make a unit focus video on them, put out a unit focus video on them real soon. I actually already recorded it. Now I'm going to have to make some small changes. You move them to the midfield, out of line of sight, behind a thing, and then you use them to blast enemy infantry off of an objective or trade. And the problem that Shining Spears were up against at their earlier cost was that they were too expensive to be a trading unit. They're really only good at killing infantry. So a lot of the things that we were trading them for were cheaper than the spears. And the fact that they're on bikes, it's like, well, you don't have to put whatever it is in a falcon. Banshees are a trading unit. Scorpions are a trading unit, but it helps to have them in a falcon. Spears come with their own transportation, but the falcon survives to continue fighting with really good shooting and toughness after the death of the infantry that it moves around, and spears just die, so their bikes weren't really worth it. Maybe at 90 points they're a viable trading unit, with the idea that they're a bit better into heavy infantry than our Banshees or Scorpions. Honestly, I think spears are still going to struggle a little bit, because I really think what they need most is to be a little bit more reliable at actually killing stuff. But I do think at 90 points, especially down from 120, they're absolutely worth thinking about. Probably in the hands of highly skilled players, they can do some work, and they are now less of a bleed in terms of usefulness for people who are including them because they are Sam Han players or in narrative casual games when we just want to use our spears. Both types of Warlock conclaves received points reductions. The Foot Warlocks are now down to 55 points, and the Skyrunner conclaves are now down to 90 points. And I think this is cute and funny and meaningless, because still nobody's going to run those units. They don't get the job done. I'm hoping that when we get our actual codex, that there are going to be some fun synergies with Warlocks in terms of stratagems or faction bonuses for like Ulthway themed or just psychic themed Aeldari, but currently Warlock conclaves just don't have a place in competitive lists. Points with reduction notwithstanding. The Wave Serpent is down to 110 points. It's still an expensive transport as the game goes. As Aeldari units go, it's a little bit more affordable at 110. And if you are running Yvraine with the 10 Harlequin loadout or 11 Harlequin loadout with maybe the Visarch or not the Visarch, I talked about this in my triple threat Aeldari video. It's a very powerful combo. Then this is just some free points for you, and maybe makes up a bit for Yvraine having gone up in points in the last update. Wraith Blades and Wraith Guard both came down in points only for the smaller units. And this is something that we've seen in this round of points updates, which I actually think makes sense, and I don't think has really been a thing historically as much, and that is units not necessarily costing double when there are twice as many, or half as much when there are half as many, because the utility of the models really changes. So now, like 5 Wraith Blades are 160, but 10 are 340, which is more than twice as much. And 5 Wraith Guard are 180, but 10 are 380, which is more than twice as much. So the cost for 10 has not changed, but the cost for 5 has, for the simple reason that the resurrection ability on the Spirit Seer makes a larger unit of Wraith Blades better than a smaller unit of Wraith Blades led by a Spirit Seer. So we're acknowledging that, not by jacking the cost on the bigger unit, which I think was already appropriately pointed, but by not penalizing people for running fewer of them by lowering the cost, which is neat. And lastly, the Wraith Knight has come down from 510 to 495, which is meaningful in that there's some Pariah Nexus secondary thing where you can put something into reserve that's less than 25% of your list. So now you could do the thing with the Wraith Knight, but as a you don't necessarily know that that's going to be the mission you're playing, so it's probably not terribly relevant. And as an overall percentage in terms of the cost of the unit, this is relatively insignificant. I think that for competitive viability, the Wraith Knight really wants to come down to around 450, but I definitely think that at 510 and at 495, at least 2 Wraith Knight builds are usable for mid-table play and competitive casual game and small tournaments and local clubs. And I have an upcoming video on the Wraith Knight in which I'll talk about how to do that. So, you know, saving 15 points, that's nice. And there's one final actual rule change, and this is to the Foot Autarch's superlative strategist rule. And theoretically, this might make the Foot Autarch a thing you would think about, whereas before nobody really did. And that is that. So superlative strategist has changed. It used to let you target this model's unit with a stratagem that you already used on a different unit this phase, and that wasn't awesome because the only thing that this model can lead is Guardians, you know, Guardian Defenders or Storm Guardians, which are not combat units. And it could also just target itself because this model's unit is this model's own unit also, or itself, right, if it's alone. But Foot Autarchs were not, like, exciting. And now what Superlative Strategist does is it reduces by 1 the cost of a CP, or the CP cost of a stratagem, which means that in addition to generating 1 CP per turn for being your warlord with Path of Command, it also gives you access to a stratagem for 1 less. Now, you're not, I don't think, likely to be using Fire and Fade on Guardians, and probably not on Foot Autarch either. Maybe if you could do it for free, you would do it on the Foot Autarch if you gave him like a Reaper launcher, but it would still cost you 1 CP, so I'm going to say not worth it. But it does mean that any of the 1 CP stratagems that you might choose, you could use for free. So think of it this way. If you take a Foot Autarch, he essentially gets another power that is like a stratagem that he can do just about every turn. Now, of course, if you're using it on him, you're not using it elsewhere on the table. But you could just like think of your Foot Autarch as always having lightning fast. It's always -1 to hit. Or it can throw a grenade for free, which is kind of cool. Or if it's leading a unit of Guardians, they can just throw a grenade. I can, if a unit is within 6 inches of me, I can, in the shooting phase, just do a bunch of mortal wounds to it for free, for no CP cost. Or you could just sort of think of it as like, if he's leading a unit of Guardian Defenders, they all automatically just get Blade Storm for free as an ability. So all of their 6s to wound will have -3 AP. Because you're definitely not using Blade Storm somewhere else on the table. Or Matchless Agility. Like they always just auto-advance 6. And maybe with Storm Guardians, right? Which have fusion guns, so they're good when they're close in. And they have the grenade stratagem, the ability to have some decent melee with a Foot Autarch in the mix and always be able to move 13 inches and still trigger Melt It. Like, maybe there's something there. Maybe there is some way that both generating a CP for you and just getting any 1-point stratagem for free for the Autarch or the Autarch's unit is such that this unit will be more viable. It's a 75-point character, which is a lot cheaper than the Autarch Wayleaper at 115 points. But the real advantage of the Wayleaper, of course, is that not only is it just faster, so you can use its fusion gun and to throw grenades and stuff, but it has lone operative, which is really the advantage. And because the Autarch can't lead anything that's a powerful combat unit, it just hasn't been an include up until now. And I haven't really spent enough time thinking about it to work out if there is some very competitive option in terms of essentially a free strat that you weren't using before. But there really might be, right? Like, and I actually think it's a little bit more likely to be on Storm Guardians than on Guardian Defenders, just because of the stratagems that you might want to use. Storm Guardians can have a couple of flamers, which auto hit, so the ability to just automatically trigger Overwatch, you could use a Fate die to automatically hit with an Autark's fusion gun, and then know that you were going to auto hit with the flamers. You could use a free stratagem to, as I already said, like auto move them 13. You could use a free stratagem to just make them -1 to hit if you're not using lightning fast elsewhere on the table. And being able to just throw grenades for free, especially when they're already quick in that other way, and they have the melt a keyword on their fusion guns, like, so they've got to get close enough to use a fusion gun. They have to get close enough to throw grenades. Like, maybe there's really something there. I will say, though, that in terms of like a combat and target elimination unit, Storm Guardians are just not good enough. They need to be making objectives sticky or doing other stuff for you to be worth taking for the points. So I remain a little skeptical. If you're running in with Guardian Defenders, maybe it's Phantasm, right? Like, actually, maybe what you do is you run your Guardian Defenders with a Bright Lance, and you have them sitting on an objective in your backfield, and every turn they're generating CP back there with your Autark, and they're generating Fate dice with the Guardian ability, and you poke the Bright Lance out just a little, the platform, and you pop something with it, and then you use Phantasm for free for 1 CP because he's leading the unit, and it scoots back into cover. That's still a 175-point package, but to be fair, an Autark Wayleaper with a Phoenix Gem is like 140, I think that's right. So you're not too far off that. And I think arguably this is a useful enough tool that you could at least think about wanting to do that. And then in the late game, when you get aggressive with the Guardian Defenders, you could trigger Blade Storm for free. Actually, you know what? When I started talking about this, I was thinking that the more likely combination is with the Storm Guardians. I think I might have just talked myself into the Guardian Defenders as the stronger pick. I don't know if this is going to be like a competitive staple, but I certainly think that there are some options here that didn't exist before and some reasons to seriously think about just a regular foot Autark, whereas before there really there was no reason to. So all the good all the news is good news, to sum up. At the very least, whatever list you're running competitively right now is probably a little bit cheaper, and maybe now you can throw in a enhancement that you didn't have before with the extra points you picked up from your Falcons, and maybe a Wave Serpent being cheaper. If you weren't already thinking about fast units that can terraform on turn 1, you definitely need 1 or 2 of those. I think all of you competitive players already had that in your list. Don't put your infiltrators on objectives. I think we kind of already knew that. Some small limitations around linchpin that you at least have to think about. And if you're a very specific kind of competitive player, maybe the secret mission thing matters to you, but I think to most of it doesn't. Most of us, it doesn't. But now, maybe you're going to try out a foot Autark with some fun combo with free stratagems. Maybe leading a unit of Guardians that you would not have otherwise been using. Maybe you're going to use some Void Reavers to scout out in front of your army on turn 1 to do actions and die as a disposable battle line unit. That's what Pirate Scum are for. After all, they left the path, they have it coming. Or maybe you're going to play around with trying to stick Shining Spears in a list as a trading unit. All in all, the impacts are modest, but interesting. There are some other impacts, of course, with reference to how other armies have gotten better or worse. There were some pretty significant nerfs to Drukari, which affect us in 2 ways. One, if we're playing into them, Drukari are not quite as scary. A lot of the like big damage dealing Drukari units, especially their HQ units, went up in cost, which also matters for us if we're running Ynnari, sadly, right? Like our Incubi are more expensive, which is sad if you were running Ynnari Incubi. Although some of the most useful Ynnari picks, the Scourges, did not change in price. And then there's some other changes, like one of the sister. I'm not a Sisters player, but the Sisters of Battle have a super clutch unit that makes their miracle dice better. Called is it the Triumph of St. Catherine? I don't know. It's this big anchor unit that makes their primary mechanic work better. That got wildly more expensive, like by some significant percentage of the unit. Sisters were doing really well in the meta, and they have historically at times been a really bad matchup for Aeldari because, like Aeldari, they're pretty quick, they're highly specialized, but they're like a more efficient trading army. So sometimes Sisters could like out-trade us, take away a couple of important Aeldari tools quick, and it could be hard to catch up, especially with their Miracle Dice shenanigans. So Sisters getting a big smackdown can only be good for us in the competitive meta. But some of these differences are probably temporary because GW says that there will be additional modifications to balance data slate stuff in December, which is not that far off. So in terms of relative power compared to other factions, that's probably not a thing to dwell on. That's going to change soon anyway, and we're going to get a codex in early 2025, so that'll change things yet again. But for now, all the news is good news. We have some new options to play around with, and it's, you know, it's always nice for your units to become cheaper. So that's it. The news from Craft World, woe be gone. A few of you will get that reference. And I will be back again soon in just a couple of days, I think, with another unit focus video. I'm going to have to reshoot and re-edit a couple after this update. And we will keep on elfing on. A special thank you, as always, to my sponsor, the Magnet Baron, my amazing patrons who I've really enjoyed over on Discord. If you have been thinking about maybe becoming a patron, the Discord community is just great. It's definitely a reason to do it in and of itself. You also get a little bit more access to conversations with me and, of course, early access to some content. If you have not liked the video, please click like. It helps. If you've not subscribed, please subscribe. That helps too. And if you want to leave a comment below on your own thoughts on how these changes may affect Aeldari, or maybe on how changes to other factions may affect relative competitive play, which is not a thing I talked about, that would be awesome. We can all help one another. Okay, back again soon. Take care. Bye.